welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to my wrap-up video for my 2013 retrospective that I've been doing for 2 months now over on my Letterboxd, Dylan_Randazzo. I've been doing a few companion videos on this channel as well. I did a video of all the Best Picture nominees for 2013 alongside Chad Webb on our show Picture This. I did a Frame Wreck episode with Matt Chapman on my show Frame Wreck about Sharknado, a movie that came out in 2013. I also did a video with Matt where I looked at Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down, comparing them side by side because they came out in the same year. And then I also did a video breaking down every single A24 release from 2013. So I'm 2013'd out, but I have one last video in me because I want to tell you all what my favorite films of that year are. And now you already know because the thumbnail spoiled it for you, but this is not a top 10 because I can't possibly narrow it down to 10. I want to talk about more movies than 10, so I figured 2013 I'm going to talk about 13 movies. It just makes sense. So here are my top 13 movies of 2013. I don't have time to list honorable mentions because, let's be honest, there is a laundry list of honorable mentions, but if you check me out on Letterboxd, you can see my full list displayed. I will put it in the description below so you can see what was number 14, what was number 21, what was number 70, because I believe it's over 70 films long. So without further ado, these are the 13 films I most recommend from that year in some sort of order, but again, the order changes every time I watch these movies. At number 13, it's odd because we're starting at the beginning of the ranking, but it's technically at the end if you were to list it from top to bottom. Anyway, I was trying to make a joke because it's the end of this ranking. It is The World's End, a great movie about the end of the world. There are a lot of films actually in 2013 that deal with the end of the world. You obviously have This Is the End, which is another film dealing with a similar idea, but I think The World's End just has a little bit more nuance just in its direction, in its style. Edgar Wright is one of my favorite filmmakers, so to see everything just kind of pop, all the colors, the amazing energetic cuts with the editing, it was all so mesmerizing to see. I think the acting across the board is really great. This follows a bunch of friends as they kind of reunite to go on this one last epic bar crawl that they never finished from their youth.
We're gonna go back to Newton Haven.
Why? 5 guys, 12 pubs, 50 pints.
60 pints.
Steady on you, Al.
But some of them have moved on with their lives. Some of them are still clinging on to the past. So I think there's a lot of great themes dealing with that idea of kind of letting the past go or trying to re-embrace the past and seeing how friendships kind of grow together or grow apart.
We are going to see it through to the bitter end. Or lager end.
I think there's some really interesting sci-fi elements here because, as the title alludes to, this isn't just about getting to a bar called The World's End at the end of their bar crawl. It actually is The World's End. They're invaded by aliens, and I also think the design of the aliens is really interesting. The way they discover who is an alien, who is not, and the way some of the violence ensues. I just think it's a really well-crafted film. It's not my favorite Edgar Wright film because I think some other films of his kind of strike me more emotionally, but I have to appreciate The World's End for its big, bold swings, and I couldn't not bring it up in a list of my favorite films of the year.
Oh no.
At number 12, we have The Broken Circle Breakdown. This is a film a lot of people probably haven't seen. This is an international film from, I believe, Belgium and the Netherlands. This follows around a couple and their child. I don't want to spoil too much because I think it's one of those movies where it hits you if you don't know what's going to happen going into it. But one of the family members suffers a really terrible illness, and it kind of evolves around this family and how they cope with that illness, not just during this illness, but after the illness, once everything has unfortunately come to a tragic end. But you also get flashbacks to when this couple met before they had a kid, and you see how like this love between this family kind of rises and falls with this tragedy. It's a really heartbreaking film. There's a lot of downers on my list here, but I think The Broken Circle Breakdown is so amazing into something that is kind of uncomfortable to talk about and uncomfortable to see, but it's handled with such delicacy and nuance. I also think the folk music angle is really interesting.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by?
There's a lot of folk music incorporated in here. A lot of you are probably going to be yelling at me because Inside Llewyn Davis isn't on my list. I was honestly a little bit bored by that film. I have to rewatch it though because I've only seen it once now. But this film just grabbed me so much more. I think because it is all about romance and connection, but also a loss of romance in the midst of a tragedy and what kind of falls apart when a family can't overcome this tragedy. And I think it's a really tough watch, but I think it's a rewarding one because it's so well done, and I do recommend it.
Give me the devil 'cause I wouldn't hold cold.
Just outside the top 10 at number 11, we have Stoker. This is a Park Chan-wook film. I'm a big fan of director Parks. I think he is like this generation's Hitchcock, and I don't say that lightly. I think there's a lot of directors who are doing thrillers and suspense really, really well, but in Stoker especially, you can really see this touch of a director who knows exactly when to push things, when to pull things back, when to build and dissolve tension. And Stoker is a great example of this kind of Hitchcockian nature to Park Chan-wook's filmmaking. It's about this young girl as she's coming of age and she loses her father on her birthday, and then her uncle magically enters himself into her life. And immediately off the bat, you know, this is a thriller, so you obviously know something's off with this relationship. The uncle, there's something you don't trust about him, but the film does a good job not giving you everything at the start. Like I said, it's a very Hitchcockian approach that you see in this film of when information is given and taken away and when intrigue is built. I just think it's such a well-crafted story. The first half didn't grab me, but as the film went on, I found myself just more and more engrossed in the story, in the dynamics, the power dynamics, who has the power and when, and the style, the tone. It's one of those interesting coming-of-age films, because when you think of coming-of-age, you think of, you know, an A24 film or a rom-com or something that your parents recommended, an old John Hughes film. But I really think this film is a coming-of-age film like no other, because it's a coming-of-age film with this Hitchcockian-like kind of glaze over it, which is something that can't be said about a lot of films of this genre. So I definitely recommend this, especially if you're a fan of Park Chan-wook. But even if you're not a fan, even if you've never seen a Park Chan-wook film, I think this is actually a good starting point, because I think it's clear enough and straightforward enough, but also entertaining. You don't get lost in the plot. It's not overly plotty or anything like that. It's pretty clear cut and straightforward, but it's just so well constructed. One of the best screenplays of the year.
Personally speaking, I can't wait to watch life tear you apart.
At number 10, we have Side Effects. It is a Steven Soderbergh film. I am a huge Steven Soderbergh fan. This may just be my favorite film of his. This film follows Rooney Mara's character as she deals with the anxieties of her husband, played by Channing Tatum, being released from prison. She kind of takes this medicine to help her cope, but this medicine gives her side effects, hence the title. But then you see what the side effects lead to. And I'm not going to say what happens, but when this happens, this thing happens, that kind of changes the trajectory of the whole film. And then you start to see how the side effects have their own effects and their own repercussions on this whole family dynamic, but also the relationship between Rooney Mara's character and her doctors.
There's been an incident.
What do we do?
No sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle.
Where's her lawyer?
She doesn't have one.
Adds a few more layers, a few more twists and turns to make this a one-of-a-kind story. And I love the way it's shot. I love the way it's filmed. It's almost like you're living inside her head and you're kind of experiencing this disorientation as she is as well, to where it adds a little bit of a sense of confusion, to where you kind of have to like maybe rewind a few scenes and be like, wait, what just happened? What just happened? But once it all kind of comes together at the end, it kind of recontextualizes everything that came before, and it's a film that I think when I rewatch it, I'm gonna get a lot more out of, even more so than I did the first time, and I already got a lot out of it. It's got some great performances. Jude Law plays the central doctor, and you can really see an amazing turn, because half of the film you're meant to root against the doctor because of all the things that Rooney Mara is experiencing, but then maybe some twists and turns maybe changes your point of view, and that's all I'll say about that.
Destroy that before it destroys you.
At number 9, we have The Spectacular Now. I already did my video on A24, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on this film, but it is a beautiful coming-of-age film. It's a very different coming-of-age film than Stoker, but I think what coming-of-age films do so well is capturing a real honesty of the time period and the age that they're covering of the subjects of their film. In this case, I think James Ponsoldt has a really good grasp of the way these characters talk, the way these characters interact. It doesn't feel like an adult writing for kids. It feels like maybe a person of that age actually wrote the film. And I always find that really impressive when an adult filmmaker can write about youth in such an authentic way that doesn't feel like they're tapping into the wrong generation or trying to like fabricate anything, and feels so real and authentic. And I think that's the beauty of Spectacular Now. I think there's a lot of moments that are like slightly improv, and even the moments that aren't improv, I think the dialogue is so good that Miles Teller and Shailene Woodley, the two leads in this thing, make it feel like it's improv, make it feel like they're just saying it as a spur in the moment thought. And
18 years old, you don't have an ex-boyfriend?
No.
Really?
Sutter, guys don't look
That's
at me like
shocking.
that. I'm like,
Yeah, absolutely, guys look at you like
No,
that.
no, no.
Amy, you're absolutely beautiful.
And that's also powerful from an actor's point of view. You know, seeing these actors bring such a real authenticity to these roles to where you don't know whether or not they're actually just speaking in the moment or if it's scripted or both or neither. You know, it's really exciting from a screenplay standpoint, but it is also well shot. It's a gorgeous looking film. It's got some really tender, beautiful moments with the two leads. So I really highly recommend it as one of the greatest romances of the past decades.
This right here, this is beautiful. This is the youngest that we're ever gonna be. This is our time. Live in the now. Cheers.
At number 8, we have The Place Beyond the Pines. This is a film by Derek Cianfrance. I was not a big fan of his film Blue Valentine. I thought it was almost a little too sad to where I didn't feel good. And Place Beyond the Pines isn't a film that really makes you feel good, but it has this energy to it that I can't really put to words, that just kind of ropes you in from the first minute and doesn't let you go to the last. But it's not like a suspense thriller by any means. It's a clear-cut drama, but it feels almost thriller-esque by the way it's paced, by the stakes given to the characters. Ryan Gosling's character especially has such an interesting arc, and I'm not going to spoil what happens to all the characters in this film, but it's interesting to see some actors only stay for an act or 2 acts of this film, yet you can feel their impact on the entire film. It reminds me of Moonlight, how Mahershala Ali is only in the first third of that film, yet you feel his presence throughout. It's a similar thing with Place Beyond the Pines, where you have actors that are introduced in the first act that you don't see again for the rest of the film, actors that are introduced in the second act that are only in the third act a little bit, and then actors that you don't even meet till the third act, but you feel like you've known them for so long because of the rich kind of setup given in the earlier acts of the film. This film really deals with hereditary bonds and the idea of, you know, father figures and the way we kind of pass on our own legacies to our children and to our children's children, and seeing how different generations interact with one another based on the generations that were set forth before them.
My son and I should be around him. I wasn't around my dad looking the way I turned out.
How are you going to take care of us?
It's such a clear 3-act structure. I think it works so well because you can kind of see the parallels in generations like you can acts of the film. And I think it's just really well structured. The drama's so good. I think the second third of the film is good, but not as great as the first and third acts of the film, which is why it's not like in the top 5. But I still think it's a really great film and one everyone should check out, especially for the Ryan Gosling performance, which is amazing, especially in the heat of Barbie. Barbie's coming out this week at the time I'm recording this, so if you want to prep with some good Ryan Gosling films, I should definitely check out Place Beyond the Pines. You should definitely check that out.
Shit, damn.
Number 7, another film I talked about in a previous video, Spring Breakers. Spring Breakers is the glow-up of this retrospective. It's a film I didn't really like. I thought it was a romanticization of a certain culture and a certain time period. But then when I rewatched this 10 years later, I realized it's the opposite. It's a criticism. It's a critique. It's an examination of a culture. And I think a film can examine something without necessarily advocating for it.
Name's Alien.
Why are you here?
I saw y'all in there. They like nice people. Come on, y'all. Why acting suspicious?
And I think it's a film that is so of its time that it feels like the film of its time. I think Spring Breakers may just be the most essential 2013 film ever because it deals with such a specific youth culture that I think a lot of people of our generation, speaking personally, my generation, can really tap into. And you can kind of see the highs, or at least what people perceive to be the highs, but also the lows and the detriments to living certain lifestyles, certain ways. I think it's a great examination of this culture. I think Selena Gomez has an amazing arc. It's like what I talked about with Moonlight and Place Beyond the Pines as well, is this character who's not in the whole film, but your impact is felt throughout the whole film. And I think Selena Gomez has that impact. There are 2 Britney Spears needle drops in this thing. One is really fun, and the other one is like almost sort of heartbreaking and tragic and oddly really emotional. You know, a Britney Spears song played by the piano, sung by all these like bank robber, you know, criminals in bikinis.
Every time I try to fly, I fall without my wings. I feel so small.
Kind of crazy that a moment in cinema like that can make me feel so affected when I hated this film 10 years ago. That's the magic of these retrospectives, is I can look at a film that I didn't used to like and love it. 10 years later, and that's what Spring Breakers did for me. But if you want to hear me go on and on and on about that film, go check out my A24 video, because I go even further in on that film. Another film I've talked about in another video, it's going to get a little redundant. Number 6 is Nebraska. There's a reason this is in a lot of top 10 lists. It's an amazing film, but it was also a Best Picture nominee, so go check out my picture this episode if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts on Nebraska. But point blank, this is one of the best films about old age I've seen. I think old age can sometimes be made as solely a joke in a film, or it can be seen as something to be sad about in a film. But what Nebraska does so well, what Alexander Payne does so well in this film, he finds ways to still laugh at the humor of old age, still find some of the sadness in it, but overall be able to marry the two to where it doesn't feel like the subjects are being exploited for this entertainment. I think it's a real humane story. I think there's some real human stuff here that a lot of people are going to connect to that never feels critical. It always feels like it respects the subjects of its film, and that's the most important thing when you're dealing with a quote-unquote stereotype, or at least what would be seen in another film as a stereotype. You really need to make sure you give that group of people respect, and I feel like this film gives elderly people a really great respect. It's just a funny film. It's a really endearing film as well. It's about this old man trying to go cash this lottery ticket in Nebraska, so he tries to walk cross country. And
So you told the sheriff that you were walking to Nebraska?
That's right. To get my $1 million.
And then his son is like, no, I'm going to drive you, Dad. And through this drive, through this road trip, they kind of bond like they never have before. And they go through other towns where they meet with some other family members. So it's a really great film about family and kind of reflecting on the things you did when you were younger and how that's kind of changed you as an adult, and the things you may regret or the things you may just want to do a little bit differently because of that. I just think it's a really nuanced film. I think it's got some great performances. June Squibb in particular is so good in this movie.
I never knew the son of a bitch even wanted to be a millionaire. You should have thought about that years ago and worked for it.
I really love it, and I love the black and white cinematography. Speaking of black and white cinematography, my number 5 is Frances Ha. This is a film written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, directed by Noah Baumbach, starring Greta Gerwig. They're one of my favorite writing-director duos ever. It makes sense because they're married. I mean, talent sees talent. But I really think Frances Ha is one of the most amazing films about this awkward kind of phase. It's not a coming of age film in the sense that like these adults are fully grown. They're like in their late 20s, early 30s. It's kind of a similar thing to another film I love from a few years ago, Tick, Tick, Boom, where I think you almost do even more growing when you're in this phase of your life than you even did as a teenager. And I think there are very few films that capture this point in someone's life as authentically and as successfully, because a lot of films that deal with 20-something-year-olds are romance films. They're all about relationships. They're usually rom-coms, and there are relationship aspects of Frances Ha, but it's not about relationships in terms of a romantic sense. There are elements of it, but it's more so about an individual trying to find her place in life, and I think there aren't enough films like that.
What do you do?
It's kind of hard to explain.
Because what you do is complicated?
Because I don't really do it.
I'm a 20-something in New York City, you know, I'm sweating recording this review because it's 1,000,000 degrees in my apartment in New York City, but you know what? I love living in New York City, and I love it even though I hate it, and it's kind of that whole idea, you know, with Frances Ha, you know, she loves her life, but she hates her life, she doesn't want to be living this life, but she loves living this life, and kind of just seeing her, Greta Gerwig's character Frances, kind of navigate this world around her. It's so relatable. It's just a film that I liked when I first saw it, because I saw it at the very beginning of college, when I was starting college, but now that I've graduated college and I've lived through a pandemic, and I'm here in New York kind of reflecting on my own life and my own career as an artist, a struggling artist in New York, I just relate to it so much, and I think films, the best films, are the ones that speak to us the most. At number 4, we have Captain Phillips, another one of the Best Picture nominees that you can hear me talk all about in the picture of this video, but I do want to tell you again why I love this film. I think Paul Greengrass has crafted one of the most suspenseful thrillers I've ever seen. The great thing about this film is that, yes, it's a thriller on the surface, but there's so much beneath the surface to dissect in regards to our relationship, the United States' relationship with third world countries, and the idea of privilege, and the idea of class, and the idea of what drives us, good or evil, what drives good, what drives drives evil and what heroism actually means versus what movies sometimes portray it as. And I think Captain Phillips portrays heroism in a very different lens than some of your more cheesy 80s and 90s biopics about these amazing individuals. Captain Phillips was an amazing individual, but you don't see this brave, stoic, heroic Captain Phillips the entire way through. You see a kind of almost transformed Captain Phillips by the end of the film. Tom Hanks does such a good job capturing not just the stoicness of the beginning of the film, but this kind of torn down, broken individual by the end.
Take your time. There's a 2-centimeter laceration on the left eyebrow. It's okay. It's
Okay.
Where it feels like one of the most honest and authentic hero stories. I feel like sometimes Hollywood likes to glamorize certain things and romanticize certain things, but Captain Phillips doesn't shy away from the kind of darkness that some characters, some people, some individuals in crisis experience. I think like the first 5 minutes, there's some really terrible dialogue, but once we get to the ship, once things ensue, I think it's a really amazing film. I love the way it's shot. It's very close quarters. It's one of those examples of handheld cinematography that actually works for a film rather than works against a film. And Tom Hanks' acting in that last act is some of the best acting I've ever seen him do, if not the best. I think it might be up there with the Forrest Gumps and Saving Private Ryans of the world. I think it might be his greatest work ever.
Yeah? Does that hurt? A little bit?
A little bit.
Okay. Is it tender? Go ahead and put your arm down. Okay, I need you to look at me. I need you to calm down.
At number 3, we have Short Term 12. This is a little indie film, but if you look at the cast, these are some big names now that weren't necessarily big names in 2013. We have Brie Larson, John Gallagher Jr., Caitlin Dever, Rami Malek, Lakeith Stanfield, Stephanie Beatriz. So many amazing, talented people that were just kind of getting their start, and that's what I kind of love to see with these retrospectives, is seeing actors who are kind of mainstay names now. Like, I mean, Brie Larson's an Oscar winner, Rami Malek's an Oscar winner, Lakeith Stanfield's an Oscar nominee at this point, but these were just such up-and-coming names. It's exciting to look back and see them at the brink of their careers, and I think this is, in some of their cases, at least with Brie Larson's and maybe even, Rami Malek and Lakeith Stanfield, some of their best work I've ever seen. It deals with a foster care facility, and I think it gives a great balance between the kids and the adults. You can make a movie about all the people who run the foster care, but then it's like, we'd be deprived of hearing the voices of the kids. Or you can make a movie all about the kids, but then we lose things on the other end. Whereas here, Short Term 12, we get a perfect balance of the adult stories with the kids' stories, and you can sort of see how the kids influence the adults and vice versa, and how they kind of come to this beautiful harmony with one another. And as someone who teaches kids, I music direct around the New Jersey area, working with kids and teaching them how to sing and working at summer camps the past decade, getting to see these kids grow and kind of become their own adults and kind of come of age, but also feeling like I made a difference in their life. It's so rewarding and so humbling. And you can see that in this film. The idea that these people almost feel gratified by what they do for the kids, but almost feel like the kids change them more than they change the kids. And as someone who works with kids, I can 100% attest to that. The kids change you more than you change them. And I think that this is something that this film gets so right, is that idea that you can make a difference in someone else's life, but it's really them who makes the difference in your life when you do this stuff and when you work with kids and when you open your mind and open your perspectives to see someone else's point of view, in this case, an adult seeing a child's point of view. I think it's one of the best films ever made about that child-adult relationship and kinship, and I really love it. It's a film that I cried a lot more the first time I saw it, only because I knew what to prepare the second time. Otherwise, this might be like my number 1 or 2, but the other 2 films just make me cry a little bit more. But this one still makes me cry.
Here we go.
Number 2, a film that really makes me bawl. It's the Best Picture winner of the year. It's 12 Years a Slave. Again, I talked about this on Picture This, so I'm not going to go too in-depth here, but this film makes me cry. It's a very emotional watch. I've heard criticisms that it kind of overindulges in the brutality, but I think, that's a totally fair criticism, and you're totally valid to feel like if it's too much. But I think the fact that there is a black filmmaker telling this story, Steve McQueen, you can really feel a lot of his anger in this film. Some of the best films are the ones where you can feel the director's voice just kind of coming through the material. And in this case, you can feel every ounce of McQueen's voice through this material, his angst, his hardship, his anger, his sadness, but ultimately it doesn't lose sight of the fact that it is trying to be a history lesson for a very important time that we cannot forget about, and I hope we never forget about in our history. There are some dark times that we still live through in regards to race and the way black people are treated, that I think this film always serves as a constant reminder of the evil that can be done in the world that we have to avoid in order to progress and to succeed. And I think it's incredibly, immensely powerful and important film because of that. But subject matter aside, I think it's just also really well crafted. I think it moves by really well. To encompass 12 years in 2.5 hours, I think is really difficult, and I think the editing team and Steve McQueen do a really good job by making you still feel like you've gone on this 12-year journey with this character without feeling like anything was too rushed either. I think the performances are amazing. Lupita Nyong'o won her Oscar for this on her breakout role. She had never acted in a big movie like this before, and she knocks it out of the park and wins this Oscar and continues to be one of our best performers. I mean, going on to do Us, Black Panther, so many amazing other performances of hers. It's a film I like talking about more than I like watching because it is so difficult to watch, but it's a film that when I do watch, I get a lot from it and I learn a lot from it, and I'm constantly reminded of the things that are important in life and the important stories we should tell. But my number one is from my favorite trilogy, from one of my favorite directors. It is Before Midnight, Richard Linklater's final trilogy capper to the Before trilogy. The Before trilogy is a trilogy that was told every 9 years. So the first film came out in 1995, the second film in 2004, and the third film, Before Midnight here, took place in 2013. And every single 9 years, a new movie would come out following the relationship between these two central characters, Jesse and Celine, played by Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. The first film follows them when they meet each other for the first time and they spend a night together, just strolling through the town, talking about their lives and connecting with one another. The second film takes place after they spent 9 years apart when they finally see each other again for the first time. And then now 9 years later, after that, they are now a married couple and they're vacationing in Greece. And you start to see how with every film, a different dynamic is added to their relationship. The second time, it's kind of rekindling old feelings while being able to kind of cement their feelings for one another, whereas here, the feelings are already cemented, and now it's about real adult issues. And I think this film doesn't shy away from the difficulty of adult relationships, and when you are married for so long, you know, there are going to be speed bumps, there are going to be roadblocks, but it's all about how you navigate it and how you communicate, and this film is all about communication. All these films are really just two characters talking, and I think that's what's so powerful about this film, is that they're just talking in a room, yet it's so exciting. It keeps me on the edge of my seat.
I don't think there's one natural human state. The human state is multiple. I mean, if that's what you see when you watching the girls play, that means you're depressed.
Maybe because I'm just so invested in these characters, or maybe the writing is just so honest and so authentic, but I just really care about where these characters are going to end up, and they're just talking in a room, yet I feel so enthralled by it. And I think that's the power of Richard Linklater as a filmmaker and as a writer, being able to keep up these conversations that keep the audience's attention. You know, you never feel bored by these films, which is a real testament, because a lot of films like this, where it's just two characters talking, can feel a little boring, a little redundant. You know, it almost feels like a play at times where, you know, why isn't this on a stage? But I also think one of the beauties to this film is that it uses the ambiance. It uses Greece as a backdrop. I went to Greece a few years ago, and it's the most amazing, beautiful place on earth. It's one of my favorite places I've ever gone to. So having that extra added dynamic as well, you know, the fact that you're two adults dealing with your own adult issues, but in the midst of paradise, like, how are you supposed to enjoy paradise when you've got all this baggage to sort through? But also, why would you try to sort through this baggage when you've got all this amazing paradise around you? And it's kind of that back and forth struggle throughout the film of, you know, what they should be talking about, what they should be discussing, when they should be discussing it. It kind of just is the essential film about middle-aged marriage. And I'm not married, I'm not middle-aged, but I just think as I grow older, I'm going to appreciate these films even more, especially this third one, because I think this one comes the closest to actually being the most realistic. The first two films kind of live in this fantastical place that I also really love. I love spending time in that kind of whimsy, love at first sight, emotional, romantic connection space, but I think this film is going to grow on me even more. And it's already my number one film of the year, but I think it's going to grow on me even more because of that honesty and that kind of brutal, tough reality. But it does still have really nice moments too. I'm the way I'm describing this film, it makes it sound like it's all just kind of pitiful and, you know, kind of driven by anger and animosity. But no, there are some sweet moments as well with this couple, because they do love each other. And I think that's the beauty of this film, is you can still love someone but have disagreements, and it's all about how you learn to toe that balance. And I think these actors, these writers, they do such a good job in emphasizing that and bringing that to life.
Still there. Still there. Gone.
So there you have it. Those are my top 13 films of 2013. If you want to check out reviews for all the other films I reviewed in the retrospective, check out my Letterboxd, Dylan_Randazzo. So if you're wondering, where's Her? Where's The Wolf of Wall Street? Where's Movie 43? If you're that person who likes Movie 43, then reviews are there for you. So go check those out, and thank you so much for... Whoa! Hello, sorry 12 Years a Slave, you went flying off the shelf. But you are one of the top 13 films of 2013, and you won the Best Picture. Congratulations. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I wanted to thank these friends who donated as part of the subathon in February, who helped the channel grow and give so much great support. Stick around on the channel because we got reviews for some pretty big stuff coming up this week, including Barbenheimer, the Barbie-Oppenheimer epic double feature I'll be reviewing later this week. We also got some other fun stuff coming to you real soon. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.